visiting faculty at Maharishi Institute of Technology in Lucknow. I'll quickly begin the session without any further ado. So the topic is from Shruti to Smriti. So first of all, it's important to understand the two keywords. One is Shruti, one is Smriti. Shruti means, Shruti is about speaking and Smriti is all about remembering. And these two are pillars of storytelling. In India, storytelling is incomplete without, without these two pillars from Shruti to Smriti. And now we place a lot of emphasis on, we place a lot of emphasis on writing. And all of us even those who are not from academic backgrounds, I think writing is something which plays a lot of importance on. But in my experience and from what I have seen, I feel what is told to us, we tend to remember that more as compared to what we write. And that happens with everybody. I think I'm not just the only person who says this. That even the smallest of incidents that are told to us by our parents, our grandparents, we tend to remember them even 20 years later. Same with stories. If our parents tell us some bedtime stories and they tell us, oh, don't accept food from strangers, so that will stay with us for the rest of our life. So again, storytelling is very, very Indian. It is very, part of the Indian knowledge system. And I think we were the first ones who brought storytelling into the mainstream domain. So I will be quickly sharing my screen so that I can move ahead with my presentation as well. Just allow me a few minutes. Janki ma'am, I hope my PPT is visible. Is it?
Yes, ma'am. It's perfect.
Okay. Thank you so much, ma'am, for confirming. Okay, now coming to, so basically this was actually a part of a paper presentation which I had done at Don Bosco College, Bangalore. So the headings might seem a little familiar as a research presentation, but coming to the topic, tracing the evolution of knowledge through oral storytelling in India. Now, when we talk about oral storytelling, I have included this picture at the very outset. Why? Because this is how storytelling primarily started in India. So people are listening to a story, they are sitting under a tree. This is very Indian. And this is what used to happen in villages and otherwise also, that, there used to be these evening sessions of storytelling and people used to come and listen to these stories. Then coming to from where did it actually start? So it started much, much before written language became widespread, even very popular. And later on, I'll come to Dastan Goi, which is a form of storytelling in Uttar Pradesh in North India. But before that, this is something which comes much before writing even evolved and it started in the mainstream domain. Now, of course, I'll skip the research questions part because this again is a part of a larger research. I'll straight come to the Shruti and Smriti. So as I said, Shruti describes the sacred text comprising the central canon of Hinduism, which of course includes Vedas, Brahmanas, Aranyakas, Upanishads. Smriti means that which is remembered. So Smriti is something which you remember or which you tend to remember. Now this can be Vedang, this can be Shad Darshan, this can be Puran, Itihas, Upaved, Tantra, Agmas, Upangs. And then of course we have the epics, we have Mahabharata and Ramayana. Of course we know that it was written, but initially the mode of communication was not just writing. These scriptures were also told by somebody to the other two generations, and that's how we know the story of Ramayana and Mahabharata. So that is one. Coming to the second one, which is of course, Shruti is that which has been heard and is canonical. Canonical in the sense something which forms which forms a larger part of the literature that we have today, the literature which is written. And this also can be talked about the Vedas. There is, of course, a lot of question around the Vedas. Some people say that, they were just told. They were never written. And some people say they were written much later. Initially, they were just commentaries which were told by, the saints or by gods to people. And then they tend to remember it. And Smriti, like I said, is which has been remembered. And it is supplementary. It may change over time. Now, there is particularly no divide between Shruti and Smriti. But they can be represented as a continuation of each other. This literature that originated within the Indian knowledge system became very, very prominent. Why did it become prominent? Particularly for two reasons. One reason is that people started developing interest in knowing about their culture, in knowing about their stories. And then later on, Ramayana and Mahabharata has gained so much popularity. People still do research on it. They write research papers on it. Entire doctoral theses are written on it. Why? Because it's an integral part of our cultural values, of our ethos. And no amount of interpretation of the original Mahabharata and Ramayana can, supplement as to what has been written in the original. Yes, interpretation is important because as time changes, we also need to update ourselves with the current knowledge, including these canonical texts. And that happens through all forms of literature, be it British literature or American literature, and so for Indian literature and Indian knowledge system as well. Now, there's one very interesting quote which I came across by Angela Carter, and she says, "For most of human history, literature, both fiction and poetry, has been narrated, not written, heard, not read." So fairy tales, folk tales, stories are all of them the most vital connection we have with the imaginations of the ordinary men and women whose labor created the world. Now, Angela Carter has a unique take on fairy tales, but that is not what I'll be getting into. Why this quote by her is important? Because stories are often not told by intellectuals, by people who work within academia, or people who are researchers who write academic papers. These stories are told by simple people, by people who might or might not have anything to do with the intellectual circles that some of us are a part of, or most of us are a part of, who have joined us today. Like, for example, our parents. Were they part of any intellectual circle? Or some of them might have been, but most of them told us stories which came from their own background, from their own experiences. So that is what Angela Carter is trying to tell us over here. Now, coming to storytelling, like I have said, this is something which stems from the basic human nature, right? And it can take various shapes and forms. Now, what are the traditions which we are going to talk about? So let me quickly talk about the traditions. Okay. So initially, the traditions that I'll be talking about are mostly from North India, because that is something which I have also heard as a child, as an adult. But there are a lot of traditions across India. Like, there is not just one storytelling tradition, there are many. And these storytelling traditions mostly originate from our ancient texts, from our epics, from our Puranas, from our folk tales, and they spread wisdom across generations. That is the main idea of oral storytelling. Now, coming to what are the different types of oral storytelling traditions. So some of you might be aware of these, some of you might not be aware of these, but most of them are very popular traditions. One is the Kathakali. Now, Kathakali is a dance drama. Dance drama, again, there are many dance dramas in India. They are known for their elaborate costumes, their makeup, their gestures. Then we have ball songs. So ball songs come from West Bengal. So these, I think the pronunciation is not correct, but as far as I know, it is called baul or something like that. But sorry for the pronunciation. They are a group of wandering minstrels, people who wander from one place to the other, and they sing these songs. They sing these, they tell these stories through songs and dances, much like what Kamala Das was talking about in the Dance of the Eunuchs. And she says that, they move from one place to the other, and their stories itself are a testament to the struggles that they face. But here they are not talking about any struggle as such. They just try to convey spiritual messages. Then coming to Puran Pravachan. Now, Puran Pravachan is the same which I showed you in the first picture. Puran Pravachan, Purans were actually very difficult texts. They were very complicated stories. So what was the second best way of telling these stories? The second best way was to organize a recital session where one person would tell the stories and then other people would contribute as well. So Pauranika, there's a Pauranika who's the narrator, and the other people are the audience. So Pauranika is the narrator. Pauranika again comes from the word Puran, and these sessions could be organized in temples or they could be organized under trees. But largely it was in temples. Then we have Katha Kalakshepa. Now, Katha Kalakshepa is a storytelling performance based in Tamil Nadu. Again, sorry for my pronunciation. Here, the narration of stories is, along with music. And the storyteller is often, seen interweaving philosophical discourse into the narrative. So these storytelling traditions serve a twofold purpose. One is to give some kind of wisdom to the people. Second is to actually continue the tradition of the Indian knowledge system in a very subtle way, not in a very, out loud way, not by writing academic papers, but in a very subtle way, just telling simple stories to children. And I can guarantee this, that from my experience, what I have seen, people tend to remember these stories much more than what they have read or they have written. I personally can tell this, that I cannot remember the entire Mahabharata if I was not told by my grandfather back in the day. He used to tell me short stories, episodes from Mahabharata. Otherwise, it's a very heavy text. You cannot read it in a day. You cannot understand it in a day. You need a Puranika to tell you the story, and that is where it is also most relished and enjoyed. Anyway, coming to the second one, folk tales and mythology. So folk tales, we all know that they are myths. Sometimes they are myths, sometimes they are realities. Like there's a very popular folk tale, which is, which I think this entire this Three universe, people who know about the movies Three or who have seen the movies Three, it is based that, there's a woman who comes to avenge men who have done something wrong. So this is a story, this is a myth. We don't know if it is a reality or not, but they have developed an entire, cinematic universe around it, just around that myth, which is prevalent in some parts of North India. And then I think there was a show which I had seen some years back, which was related to a South Indian myth as well. Back in, I don't remember the name of the show, but I think that was also based on some kind of folk tale or myth. So the reason why it becomes so popular is because people can relate to it. They also have heard about it from somebody. Then coming to Jataka tales. Now, Jataka tales we must have read as kids. They are very popular. They are about lives of the Buddha. And they talk about kindness, they talk about wisdom, they talk about compassion. Then we have Ram Leela. Ram Leela again is a reenactment of Ramayana. It's performed, widely during the Shera. So the Shera is again celebrated across India in different ways, but Ram Leela remains an integral part of the Shera celebrations. But why do we need to even listen or watch Ram Leela now? Perhaps there is no need, right? Because we all know the story of Ramayana, but the same story is enacted year after year after year to us. Why is it done? Because it helps us keep alive the tradition that, good always wins over evil. There's no other reason. We all know the story of Ramayana. We have been seeing it from our childhood, from time immemorial. The reason why these stories are told time and again is to keep the Indian knowledge system alive. Otherwise, now if you see, again, they are making Ramayana, and there's some crores that have been spent on the creation of Ramayana. The one I think it's very much in news. They have got people from abroad to do the VFX and all of those things. Why is that the case? Because people want the tradition to be alive. People, sometimes they work for years in order to keep the tradition alive. And I think that is what makes it very, very important. The entire tradition, the entire, the tradition of Ram Leela, of Jataka tales, all these things become of primary importance. Now, coming to the next thing, which of course is very important, is lectures on rhetoric and belles letters. Wrote that the genius of the Eastern nations in particular was from the earliest times much turned towards invention and the love for fiction. Their divinity, their philosophy, and their politics were clothed in fables and parables. The antiquity and pervasiveness of the Indian art of storytelling do not escape notice when contending with the origins and inspiration for some of the world's most popular literature. This has been said by Hugh Blair. So Hugh Blair again was a scholar on on rhetoric, and he was a scholar on fiction as well. And he is saying this about Eastern nations in particular, about how they have invented and reinvented fiction time and again. But I personally feel that, fiction is something which is not reinvented. Fiction is not something which can be reinvented. Fiction is written, and the love of fiction is translated through readers. And I think the same applies to storytelling. I don't think that stories are just told to us. We as listeners, as receivers of the story, just love it so much that we keep continuing the tradition. And our parents tell us, then we tell our kids, then our kids will tell their kids, and then so on and so forth. The story keeps progressing. I mean, I was told the same Mahabharat, which my dad was told, and then my dad was told by his dad, and he was told by his dad. So it's a tradition which keeps circulating. And then my mom will tell me a story about her childhood, and then I will tell that story in future to my kids. And so it keeps circulating like that, right? So we do not, fiction is just written. We as readers, we tend to, communicate our love for fiction through oral storytelling. Now, like I said, I will particularly focus on North India. Later on, if I do get a chance to have an FDP on this topic, I might include details of other storytelling sessions, because a 1 hour webinar is definitely very less for this topic. So the first one is Katha. We all know the tradition of Katha. Katha is there in Jainism, it's in Vaishnavism, it's in Puranic texts, it's in Vyakaran, it's in Vedant. So Katha is a vital element in Indian literature. Puranic texts consider Katha as a layered fables and poetic compositions, while Kavya describes it as imaginative prose narratives. So Vyakaran, in Hindi, Vyakaran is about speaking. So Katha is a fictitious storytelling. Now, fictitious is important here to note, because why I said fictitious is because these are sometimes real and sometimes they are just myths which have been created by people to safeguard some kind of opinion. So they are not always true. So that is one disclaimer which I always give when I talk about oral storytelling, that everything that we hear is also not true. So we need to also use our own judgment to see what we are being told is true and what we are being told is not true. Now coming to something which I will focus on, which again is a revival in its respect, is called Dastan Goi. Dastan comes from Persian. It means story, and Goi means to tell. So Dastan Go was a person who was a traveler, and he used to come to the courts of the Mughal rulers back in the 17th, 18th century, and he used to tell these stories of his travels. And so Dastans mapped new worlds and horizons, because in India, when people were coming, there have been so many travelers who have come from different parts of the world, Ibn Battuta and the ones that we have read in history about. When these people used to come, they used to narrate about their travels, what all is happening around the world, because there was no social media back then. So we didn't know what is happening. Like today, if you want a news on the tariff, it's available on a click. But at that time, if there was some news or some kind of revelation, it was only told by these Dastan Goes. Dastan Go is the person who tells these Dastans. Now, this form of storytelling is very popular from the city where I come from. I come from Lucknow, and in Lucknow, this tradition is extremely popular. Also popular in some other parts of North India, but particularly in Lucknow, it's very popular. Why is it popular? Because people have kept it alive. This tradition was done away with years back, but people revived it. People studied on it. People did their research on this and hence kept it alive. Now, Dastan can be of any type. It can be narrated in a single setting where basically a person comes on the stage and performs the Dastan. That is the difference. Earlier, the Dastans were not performed. They were just told. Here, Dastans are performed. Performed in the sense that they come, like when I used to do theater, we used to do this form of storytelling where we used to have a group of people and everybody had a particular role in the Dastan, but it's very spontaneous at the same time. So you cannot really prepare much because it's very spontaneous. So you go on the stage and you start narrating the Dastan, and then as soon as and then it shifts to the other person or the other character, and like that the entire cycle gets completed in a single setting or in multiple settings. It depends on the story that you have taken. During the time of the Mughals, the females of the house, they used to stay in this place called the Zanan Khana, the Zanana. And there was a lady Dastan Go. We should not ascribe titles as lady or men or whatever. But I personally feel that, at that time, for a woman to be telling stories itself was a very big thing. So hence they are calling it a lady dastan go. She was basically someone who was fairly educated, and she could replicate the amusement of the male section. So male section, of course, had their own fun and games going on, but the females were often secluded. And so hence for them, there was this woman who was educated, who could, talk about her experiences, and hence she used to tell these stories. So she was called Lady Dastango. Now, of course, we just call them Dastangos. There's no title separately for men and women. Now coming to the revival, how this revival happened. So before I talk about the revival, I would like to talk about Shams-ur-Rahman Farooqi. Shams-ur-Rahman Farooqi is a great Urdu scholar. He's somebody who has written tremendous amount of work on Dastan Go, the art of storytelling. And he was the one who fought to keep this tradition alive. Otherwise, back in 1857, the tradition was almost over. And in this particular dastan that he talks about, he says 5 elements are important. One is razm, which translates to war. One is bazm, which translates to gathering. One is hoish, which translates to romance. One is stylism, and one is ayari. They all were written down, they all were stories, and they all had the extempore brilliance and individualistic oral appeal of the narrator. Rampur in North India became the center of the development of Dastan tradition, and the subject matter of the Dastan also moved away from Amir Hamza tales to a more eclectic mix. So different types of tales came coming, and the genre became wider, and people started contributing. Now, in Dastan Go, earlier the case was that the person who was listening used to be the disciple, and the person who was narrating used to be the master. But of course, now it has changed, because now audience also is a very active party. Audience are much more aware, and so they are also active participants in the Dastan Go story. Now, Mahmood Farooqi is the one who has done this, and he also was awarded the Bismillah Khan Yuva Puraskar by the Sangeet Natak Academy, and he has his book called Besieged, Voices from Delhi, 1857, which was awarded the Ramnath Goenka Award, and then he has been a visiting fellow at the University of Michigan, Berkeley, Oxford. He also was a Rhodes Scholar, so he has not just popularized Dastan Go here, but also back in UK and US and other parts of the world. Now, my intention here was also to talk about digital media. Storytelling, I feel, would have vanished way back in time if it was not for social media. That's my opinion. I feel that social media has made storytelling much more accessible. And I now feel that many young people, many of my friends, they also take active participation. Those who are theater enthusiasts, they have these, play readings, they have these poem reading sessions, they have these storytelling sessions. So literature, in a way, is no more about writing papers and studying theories. Literature has developed, and literature has developed to a certain extent that it is making storytelling again a norm, like it was back in the day. People keep uploading things on social media, so there are the engagement increases, and that's how Dastan Go itself became very popular. So I don't think it's just one man who has made it popular. I think the people associated with him, their social media presence, their promotional marketing and everything, their PR has made storytelling such an important thing now, that everybody, I have seen people pay thousands of rupees of tickets to go and see these Dastan Goes. I mean, there was once an event organized in Lucknow, and I remember one of their master Dastan Go was coming. I think I'm forgetting the name, but he was coming, and people had paid, I don't know how much ever the ticket was, and they had paid, and they had gone to see this form of storytelling. So I feel, like I said, in order for storytelling or the Indian knowledge system to progress, we have to become the vehicles for change. It is not something which is going to happen in a day. It is also not something which will just happen with the efforts of one person. It will not happen if books are written on it, because I can tell you that people who are not in the academic circle or the intellectual circle, they do not read research papers so much. They do not read heavy books so much. So for them, we have to make it more accessible. And I think that's the inclusive nature of storytelling and of literature at large, that it makes things more inclusive for other people as well. So I think this was the part of my presentation which I wanted to share. Here again, I have talked about the different digital humanities projects which are going on. So there is the Ramayan project, there is the Panch Tantra online project, there is the DH project. So these are different projects that have made these storytellings, much more accessible. Now coming to another very important thing, which I thought I will of course talk about in a later session, but without talking about this, I don't think any form of storytelling or theater a session is complete. Is rasa theory. Rasa theory is very important for two reasons. One is that it talks about how the aesthetic relish is brought about more by the person who's watching or experiencing it rather than the person who's performing it. Now, rasa theory was given by Bharat. We all know the context. For people who don't know the context, it was given by Bharat Muni in his book Natya Shastra. Natya Shastra is all about a commentary on the nature of theater, on the nature of acting, on the nature of visual experience. But what is important for us is not what rasa theory is. That is not what I'm going to talk about, because that can be a separate session. And rasa theory in detail is a very heavy theoretical concept, so I'll not get into that. What I'll get into is how rasa theory is actually used in real life. Now, people who watch Indian cinema, two very popular movies. One is DDLJ, one is Lagan. DDLJ is Dilwale Dulhania Le Jayenge, and Lagan, of course, 2001 was an Oscar entry from India. These films like DDLJ, people are still watching after 30 years. I mean, it's still there in Maratha Mandir in Mumbai. But why are people watching movies which are 30 years old? Why are people still interested in talking about Lagan and researching about Lagan? Is because it has evoked a certain emotion in people which is still relevant. That is the main reason. The emotion is still relevant. The kind of aesthetic relish that it gives is still relevant. There are two artists. One is Anish Kapoor, one is Subodh Gupta, who also use these abstract forms and metaphysical themes when they talk about Indian aesthetics. But largely, if we see a lot of Indian cinema, it is known for the aesthetic relish it provides. If you see films in the West, one of the things with films in the West is that they do not have a lot of song and dance, and of course they have very good technology, they have very good VFX, they have very good music, but at the same time there's something unique about Indian storytelling and Indian cinema and Indian art. It's something which it evokes an emotion. It's very out there, it's very expressive, which I think is why people talk about DDLJ even 30 years later, which is why people talk about a movie like Lagan. And there's one very popular director in Indian cinema, Sanjay Leela Bhansali, who makes movies which are opulent sets, out loud, large. Rasa to be evoked, there has to be something which is different than our regular life. Otherwise, why will rasa be evoked anyway? Because we all live a life which happens in a structured manner. So for us to experience rust, for us to experience aesthetic relish, there has to be something different. And I think that is what storytelling and cinema does for us. It does something which goes beyond the aesthetic relish, which goes beyond our day-to-day experiences. And I think that is what Bharat Muni was talking about. He was not talking about just giving a theory and talking about 8 emotions, hasya, raudra, karuna and all that. He was talking about the experience that one has from these, movies and these stories and these forms of storytelling. And now, of course, Bharat has basically called the human soul as Bhav Jagat. That, in our soul, we have a world of emotions. And he also talks about conveying emotions. The actor step by step opens the inner Bhav Jagat of the character, which can be relished and which can be felt. So these emotions are embodied and they are translated from one person to many. The model spectator is called the Sahadra. Sahadra is a person who empathizes with the author. So as audiences, as people who are watching, we kind of develop an empathy for the author. We develop an empathy for the person who's listening or who's talking. So this is, I think, largely the more scopus of my presentation. I think we have around 10 minutes. So I would like to take questions now, but before I take questions, I would like to also introduce you to this particular, website. So just give me a moment. I will just show you this website. So I hope this website is visible to all of you. This is called this is the Dastan Goi website, which I wanted to show. As you can see here, they have talked about the revival, founders, gallery, reviews and writings by Mahmood Farooqui. So, there's a detailed website right here. This is basically how a Dastan Go happens. I don't think the audio will be visible, but I'll just try to play this video. If it works, I'll just try to play this video. Just 1 second. Okay, so this is the video which I wanted to show. People, there are a lot of, like you can see here, they have another, they have these shows which they keep organizing. So this entire website now, just imagine a tradition which is around 100 years old, and a person coming in and rediscovering it, and they have also called it the rediscovered art of Urdu storytelling. So there's a reason for that. It's not just that they have just created a website. There's a reason for it, and the reason is that they want to do something which speaks for itself. And they have said here that is a narrative adaptation of the Tilisme Hashruba. So this is basically what Dastan Go is all about, what storytelling is all about. And if you are interested in storytelling, you can definitely visit their website. So with this, I think I would stop my presentation, and I would open the floor for questions, because I think it would be better if we can have a conversation rather than just me speaking non-stop. So yeah, that's end of my presentation. I'll stop sharing my screen now. And if you have any questions, any opinions, I would love to listen to any opinions on storytelling. So please go ahead with that. Ma'am, I'm done with the presentation. Now we can open the floor for questions.
Yes, ma'am. Participants, if you have any doubts or query, you can unmute yourself and ask to ma'am, or you can write down in chat box also. You can share your experience also.